another installment episode where today we're going to be talking about harmony, and this is Win with Glenn.
Welcome to the Win with Glenn video podcast, where Glenn Henderson and special guests will give you the tips, insight, and tools you need to grow, develop your business and career. Go with us as we dive into the best practices and rock-solid principles that will elevate you and bring proven success. Now, here's Glenn Henderson.
Today, Win with Glenn, my guest, Verdun Woods. Vernon, you're the subject matter expert. You're the guru. You're the Yoda of marriage. And today, we're going to be talking about harmony. I know in the past, first time that we were together, the Thrives, we did a T, which is trust.
Right.
And today, harmony. My wife and I love my wife. She's my best friend, and we make music together.
Yes.
Since we're harmoniously together. But talk to us because I just in my world and interactions and marriage is the key, is the cornerstone to everything. And unfortunately, there's too many people who just thrown in the towel. Or there is no harmony. They're just together.
Right.
They're just, they're trying to put some salt.
Sure.
One person got high blood pressure and they're putting a little salt in the food to try to expedite the end of things. But
Right.
that's not what God had in mind. So I know you spoke with us in the book that was released, Thrives. It's an acronym, T, trust. Tell us about the H in harmony.
Sure. So harmony. When I think about harmony, immediately I jump to musical harmony. It just, as I thought about that concept in writing about this, and musical harmony is the outcome, as is relational harmony, of a number of inputs, right? Well, marriage as an institution, in God's intent was that the two distinct and separate people will become one. So oneness is the goal of marriage, and yet oneness has the challenge of dealing with differences. And so when I thought of the differences that exist in a marriage, everything from gender differences. There have been studies that show that there are literally 100 differences between a male and a female brain, and this is
Only 100.
at least 100, at least 100 that have been recorded, and that just tells me, just in terms of our anatomy, our thought process, that we're so different as men and women. But there are also differences that relate to our families of origin and backgrounds, our personality, our socioeconomic status, so many things. And these differences, if not understood and managed, have the tendency to cause division
Right.
among us. And division, of course, is the opposite of oneness and unity. So I thought about vocal harmony and thought about how you have alto, tenor, soprano, bass, and how these different voices, when intentionally worked upon to blend together and to leverage these differences rather than allowing them to divide, create a combined sound that is richer, that is more robust than individual parts alone.
Right.
And so with respect to harmony, it's when we recognize that there are going to be differences between us as husband and wife, and if we allow it, those differences can cause division. But if we applaud and recognize and celebrate those differences and leverage them to our combined advantages, they can make beautiful music together.
Right. Yeah, I remember in what you were saying, because you mentioned oneness and harmony, that there was a couple, they were just getting ready to get married, and they say the two will become one flesh, and then somebody said, I wonder which one they're going to become. That's not what we're talking about in harmony. No. Or my analogy is, men are, then tell me, you'll help me with this, but men are like the sun, and women are like the moon. So the man, he's up and every day the sun rises, it's the set sun, nothing changes. Well, a woman, you could full moon, half moon,
Okay.
quarter moon. You you don't know. It is changing every day, and somehow those two differences has to come in and merge, and actually, when properly aligned, there's harmony. Is that sort of,
Oh, absolutely.
or,
You sound like
or is that my dysfunctional thinking that you said that's not the type of harmony?
it sounds like the age of Aquarius, but we'll in alignment of the moon and the stars. But it's a little bit out of my league as far as that analogy, but I'll run with it. I'll say that with respect to that vocal harmony, back to the musical harmony, that it requires some critical components to be successful at achieving harmony. It's not easy. When you're singing together, you have to have one, a very good listening ear. You have to be in tune with the sounds of your voice and the sounds of others. Secondly, you have to cooperate and collaborate together. It requires patience. It requires
So these will be
practice.
tips. These will be tips.
Absolutely.
So give me one tip, because I'm yeah, I need one.
Okay.
Give me one tip that will help me in having a greater sense of harmony in my marriage.
Well, I think part of it starts with an attitude on our heart, a mindset, and you know, so many people seem to want to avoid conflict in
No one like
at
my,
all
my
at all
wife tells
costs,
me all the
right?
time well, first of all, nobody likes, or you shouldn't like conflict,
Right.
You should like conflict.
No, not at all. I mean, but the reality is conflict happens.
Right.
It happens, and it happens because of those differences mentioned earlier. And when those differences run into each other, depending upon how we react and respond, there's conflict. The question isn't if conflict is going to happen; it's what do we do when it does happen.
So before you go on, so conflict is not a reflection of a poor marriage. Is that true or false?
It
From
is
what you're saying?
absolutely true that
It
it is not a reflection of a poor
Okay,
marriage.
okay.
I would almost argue that the lack of conflict is a reflection of a poor marriage. Well, how does that? What do you mean? Well, that means that if I don't have a different of opinion or idea or perspective on things, then one of us isn't necessary. If I'm just a clone of my spouse, then you know, we haven't become one. We become that one you talked about earlier. Which one?
Right,
Who's the dominant party that forces the other to conform to, you know, their image?
Okay.
But if we're being who God made us to be as individuals, we are going to have, and if we're being honest in our communication with one another, there are going to be times of conflict. And so what do we do when it happens?
Right.
And I think that to your point about a practical tip as to how to achieve harmony,
Right.
it starts with a mindset about how we address conflict when it arises, and more importantly, why. So the motivation for addressing conflict and resolving conflict has to be to win the person as opposed to the point. If my driving motivation is all I'm concerned about is being right,
Getting my point across.
getting my point across.
Sure.
Well, you know, we have to think about what happens in our relationship when conflict happens. There's a breach that occurs in some cases in trust, in fellowship with each other, in our enjoyment of one another's company, and in most cases, if not all, that breach is not a healthy state of being for either party.
Right.
So the something's lost in the process when that occurs, and the teaching of Scripture tells us that if we handle conflict properly, if we approach it with the right approach, but more importantly, the right intent and outcome in mind, then we will win the person.
Okay.
We will gain that person back. We will restore that lost trust, that lost fellowship,
Right.
that lost enjoyment with one another.
So I think what I'm hearing you say, is that harmony, I'm going to do this sort of in reverse. Harmony, you can't have harmony if, which happens all too often, where one person is silent or the other person is given a silent treatment.
Sure.
Because that's not really harmony.
Not at all.
Harmony is when both folks, both, the male and female, that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, I know. The
The
husband and
male,
wife. Okay.
well,
Another episode.
where that's right, where the two people actually, there's different notes, different perspectives, but when you are doing that respectfully, when you're doing that based upon your, I guess, the roles, which we'll talk about, that when that's done in an honoring way, that then there truly is harmony. This is great stuff. I mean, I may have to write you a check before this is over. Okay, there's some sofa and
Right.
but give our audience as we can sort of wrap this second acronym that thrives. Give us a tip, another tip, but this will be more in just a practical conflict resolution.
Sure.
And so I'll set it up. We have differences over raising our children.
Okay.
Regina sees one thing one way. Now you gotta do this real time because she
Right.
might look at this.
Okay.
So.
I'm gonna give you
And
the same advice.
and
but
that's,
if you look at it
you know, I see that a lot of times too. When people go into counseling, there's always his way, her way, and I think that's one of the things that I really appreciated in what you did in this writing is not his way, is not your way, is God's way.
Right.
So give me that tidbit there that would help our audience.
Absolutely. So again,
Raising kids, we have different views.
okay. So as with any conflict, it starts with approaching the other party with the issue that you have. So taking the initiative. Okay, we've got this conflict, but if we allow ourselves to kind of, go in our neutral corners and never really come together and address it, we're operating on assumption. I'm assuming what my spouse's position is on this issue, or maybe it's been stated, but I'm assuming why they hold that position. So it starts with taking initiative to confront, if you will, the issue in a proactive way, and then
So what is that? Just give me that one piece. She sees it this way. I see it that way. How do we resolve it where we're harmonious?
right. Well, again,
Putting you on the spot.
yeah, I hear you. So it's the courage to air your perspectives at the front end, right?
Okay.
With the risk that you might be wrong.
Okay.
And the willingness to be specific. Okay, in this instance, when we were dealing with this discipline matter with our child, you said or did X, Y, Z, and I have a concern with the outcome of that decision or the fact that we didn't collaborate on that, and here's my concern, and express in detail, this is what my concern is. And then secondly, doing so in private rather than fronting that person off in front of other individuals, even the child
Then
in some cases.
that will keep the harmony. Okay.
That will keep it for sure. And
Okay.
and then the willingness to allow that person time to reconsider their position on the matter.
So I'm gonna take this and kind of put it all in a box, and this is for me, and that's make a joyful noise unto the Lord, not to one another. So do harmony with one another, but not noise to one another. This has been Win with Glenn. I really appreciate that harmony. We'll see you next time where we're talking about concepts that will help you. This is Win with Glenn. I'll see you in our next installment.
Thank you for joining us for the Win with Glenn video podcast. Stay connected by following and subscribing to this podcast on these platforms. Join us every week as Glenn and special guests give you the tools you need to grow and have a successful business or career.